Hello, I'm coming to you on April 5th on my usual comments, with my usual comments on Ukraine. Today I'd like to talk a little bit about, after I finish with the battlefield looks very good for the Ukrainians. They defeated the Russians at Kiev. The Russians are repositioning to the east, and there will be a major battle in the Donbas region, which the Russians have contested for some time now. I think the Ukrainians will win. I think we must supply them with every single weapon system they've requested, tanks, aircraft, air defenses, mid and long range air defenses. And I think the Ukrainians will win. The Russians have been mauled in the Kiev area and in other regions. They've sustained casualties that are inconceivable for a modern army. But again, they've behaved like criminal gangs on the rampage. This is a Russian way of fighting. It, I guess, adopts things from Mongol medieval warfare. They've murdered civilians. They've committed war crimes. The atrocities are inconceivable in the modern age, but there you have it. I think that hurts them politically. I think the European Union is looking for more sanctions to place on the Russians, and I think these sanctions are coming. I think most of the distinctions, which I thought were specious to begin with, between offensive and defensive weapons have been set to the side because of the Russian atrocities. I think we are getting tanks to the Ukrainians, and we should get artillery systems. I think the British are sending modern artillery systems for the Ukrainians. The Czech Republic is sending tanks. I think they should be well armed. And again, the Russian ineptitude, failure of logistics, failure of command and control. I don't think these things are still rife in the Russian campaign, and I don't think they bode well for Russia being able to win this. I think the Ukrainians should aim for victory, total victory, drive the Russians completely out of the country. So, and that will be an absolute victory, humiliate Putin. And when the body bags begin to come back, I think the narrative of Russia as the third Rome, Ukraine being run by Nazis, which I'll get to in a minute, and support for Putin will erode. I think Putin has begun his long goodbye. I think 2 years from now, Putin will not be in power, but we'll see. Concerning Putin's argument that there are Nazis in Ukraine, let me explain that. I think he is taking aspects of Soviet history, particularly World War II, when the Ukrainians, reeling from the Holodomor, that is the attempt by Stalin to starve, not the attempt, the man-made starvation, the man-made hunger that Stalin created that killed about 4 million Ukrainians, which was clearly genocide, wreaked on the Ukrainians because Stalin was a great Russian nationalist. Unlike Lenin, Stalin believed that all nationalities should bow to Moscow and should be kept under strict and absolute control. And Ukrainians' sense of freedom, which comes out of a tradition of the Cossacks and the whole idea that they are on the frontier. In fact, Ukraine itself means borderland. Stalin he actually murdered 4 million Ukrainians. And in the 30s, it created a great deal of antagonism towards Russia. So when there were many nationalist groups and nationalist leaders, the most prominent of those leaders was named Stepan Bandera. and he created the organization of Ukrainian nationalists. And when Hitler had launched Operation Barbarossa in 1941, June 22nd, Bandera joined the Nazis with his fighting units, his militia. Bandera was trying to obtain from Hitler a promise of, or at least an acceptance of Ukrainian independence at the end of the war after the Soviet Union was defeated. Very soon thereafter, Bandera found out that Hitler was not interested in Ukrainian independence, but was seeking Lebensraum, that idea of a greater German state, and the elimination of all Slavic peoples, and removal from that area so that it could be resettled in a great kind of racial empire of the Germans. Once that became clear to Bandera, he then was opposed the Nazis and was imprisoned by the Nazis. It was only at the end of the war, when the Germans were hard-pressed by the Soviets, that they thought that Bandera's partisan units could be useful in fighting the Soviets. And they let Bandera out, although for some time he was, the threat of death was hanging over his head. Well, Bandera then began to fight both the Nazis and the Soviets at the same time. So that there, at the end of the war in the Ukraine, there was this strange mix of Ukrainian nationalist fighters, pro-Soviet partisans, and the retreating Germans. That eventually was sorted out, and then Stalin was able to control all of the Ukraine, because until 1945, Western Ukraine was controlled by Poland. It had been ceded to Poland in the treaties that ended the First World War in 1919. And Joseph Pilsudski, the great Polish general, Marshal Pilsudski, was able to defeat the Bolsheviks at the gates of Warsaw and seize Western Ukraine. So Western Ukraine was separate. Although Bandera fought against the Poles as well, he was a true, if somewhat violent, Ukrainian nationalist. The argument that Putin now makes is that followers of Bandera are still in power, or have stolen power, and have placed Ukraine under their sway. That's why he calls Bandera a Nazi, because Bandera hated the idea of Russian control or Soviet control over Ukraine. He also opposed Polish control. And at the end of the war, he also fought the Germans. So, yes, Bandera was a proto-fascist in the 30s and 40s, although fascism doesn't exist today. They're ethno-nationalist, and there are some ethno-nationalist units who are devoted to the ideology of Bandera. The Azov Regiment fighting in Mariupol clearly follows that idea. But many Ukrainians see Stepan Bandera as a nationalist leader, and there are many statues to him throughout the country. One of the things that I think Putin has now created is this greater animosity towards Russians. Russians bear moral complicity with the atrocities that the Russians have committed in Ukraine, and therefore it may be a self-fulfilling prophecy, that is, attacks on Russians. And again, Russians seem to buy the narrative that Putin has put out there. And it's a narrative that is tied to Soviet history, but it has no bearing. The actual government of Ukraine is not Nazi. There are no Nazis anymore. The National Socialist movement was a byproduct of the interwar period between World War I and World War II. Nazis don't exist. There are ethno-nationalists, and they're everywhere. They're in Russia, they're in Ukraine, they're in Poland, they're in China, they're in Serbia, certainly. But it is the Russians who've committed these atrocities. So it behooves the civilized world to stand up to Russia and stop it. How do we best stop it? By placing every weapon system at the disposal of the Ukrainians and allowing them to drive on to victory. I don't think that, given the atrocities of Bucha and the atrocities that are likely to be found in many more cities in Ukraine, that there is any hope for negotiated peace. I think the one hope that we have is Ukrainian victory. So I believe that we should give everything to Ukrainians and allow them to drive the Russians from their soil. If you like this channel, please subscribe. I appreciate the subscription. Please comment. I appreciate the comments. And Slava Ukraini.